All right, so for my targeted 90-day school improvement plan, I chose to focus on the achievement levels of students with disabilities in Algebra 1. Now, I have a couple reasons why I chose that. One, I have a vested interest in students with disabilities. I serve as the lead special education teacher at Tippens High School. Work hands-on with almost all of these students at some point in their high school career. So that's one reason. And then also, since it's a 90-day action plan, most courses at Pickens High School are blocked. So it's a semester-long course since we're on 4x4 block schedule. Algebra 1 is one of those rare classes where it is a year-long course because it is coupled with an Algebra 1 support course. So it runs for consecutive year, 90-minute block. And this allows, I feel like, to get data from the beginning of the school year, mid-semester, and then in May as well. So I felt like it would be easier to track. And then finally, it just so happens that if you go back, and I chose to go back to the 2018-2019 EOC scores, pre-COVID, even though there was tests taken last year because of the waiver and the different students being out from quarantines and the schools being quarantined. I felt like the 2018-2019 data and a couple years before that was probably the most accurate picture of the functioning of our students. The Algebra 1 EOC had historically been the assessment with the highest percentage of beginning learners. And then if you dig into that data just a little bit more, you also see it has the largest gap between the state average for students with disabilities. So in 2018-2019, the average of beginning learners on the Algebra 1 EOC, so the students with disabilities, was 88.9%, while the state average was 64.5%. So there's a substantial gap there. And you would expect a gap between the regular ed students and the special ed students, but to have that big of a gap between the same demographics just between the state and the school it is concerning. So, I felt like that was something to target, and we also have more recent data. We use a program called iExcel that has a diagnostic test that shows a similar gap, at least between the regular ed and the special ed students in our school. So to make this initiative and roll it out, I would need to work obviously with a PLC group. And since many of the teachers have multiple preps within the school, not all of them are in the same PLC. So my first order of business would be to realign these PLCs, especially the Algebra 1, to make sure resource, like separate class teachers and the co-teachers, all of the teachers that work with the students with disabilities in Algebra 1 were in the same PLC so they could collaborate with each other and kind of be on the same level content-wise and probably areas of need as they go through and start planning. And then what I hope to achieve with this plan, well, the main goal obviously is to support the students who are struggling with math and to help fill in those content areas that they've probably missed in previous school years. And because of COVID, being out of school, obviously, there's going to be areas of need. And then, when it comes, if we want to break it down to numbers, because everything comes down to numbers, what I would guess or what, I would propose would be within 4 years to expect the percentage of students with disabilities at Pickens High School to be performing at the beginning level, learner level, to match the state average. I think in 1 year that's a little ambitious. I think that might be shooting a little too high, but I think within 4 years you could definitely meet that rate and hopefully be below it and start seeing those other distinguished and developing learner levels increase. So what I would shoot for is by the spring EOC, I would hope to increase by 6%. That's a fourth of the gap displayed during the 2018-2019 year. So make a 6-point increase in the EOC scores. And then barriers I might encounter, undoubtedly some teachers are going to be resistant to change. Always someone is resistant to change. And one of the initiatives I suggest is using an alternative teaching strategy in the classroom. So this is a type of flexible grouping where there would be two teachers, and for a co-taught, there's a regular ed and a special ed teacher. And even in the resource or separate class setting, we have the special ed teacher, and each one also has a parapro or paraprofessional. So I would suggest breaking them into groups and having a smaller group, because I think the majority of students are going to be the ones that need the remediation and the extensive coursework to get them up to standards. The large portion of the class is going to be receiving the same instruction. And then there will be a flexible group of students who are receiving a little more enriched, more rigorous curriculum to meet their level of needs. So they're getting a differentiated lesson. And that's flexible because if you go into the next standard, let's say a student in the other group succeeds or exceeds at that, they can move to that grouping. So they're flexible, and it keeps moving back and forth wherever there's a need. But I can see that being a barrier, as some teachers are having to be trained to let go of a little bit of control to make this happen, because with such a wide array of skill levels, it's hard to make sure that the students are being met where they at their level of needs. And then finally, the steps I would take to implement this plan. So one, I've kind of already talked about it, but we're going to review current progress, and this is through previous data prior to Christmas break. So I'm thinking, in my mind, 90 days, let's knock out some stuff before Christmas break, and then we're going to get really going after we get back. So we'd look at, for most of the Algebra 1 students, some of them are 10th grade, but a lot are 9th grade. You're going to look at their end of grade milestone scores in math, also the IXL diagnostics. And then, like I said before, realign the Algebra 1 PLCs to make sure all of the special ed teachers that work with these special ed students are together in their PLCs. And then step 2, right after the break, I say you administer a new diagnostic using the IXL. You analyze these results, develop a list and standards where you have the areas of needs. Break those down, have a list, know what you need to hit, and it's probably going to be very similar across the different classes of this demographic. And then I would say at this point, you kind of start creating the flexible alternative teaching groups in the classroom. You see where the different levels are, the different standards in which students, how they can be divided, and also how the teachers can be divided and optimize their strengths. Then step 3, PLCs will meet weekly going forward throughout the semester. They're going to review common assessments, complete item analysis on these common assessments, see what standards, 80% of students are missing. Question 3, what standard does this align to? Do we need to remediate this? And also, as you go forward, making adjustments to those flexible groupings to make sure they are still flexible, that you're just not sticking with the same students the whole time. If a kid is moved up and is ready, wonderful. In the same way, if a kid needs more support, they may go from the smaller group into the larger classroom. And then final, at the end of the year, review the end of the semester IXL diagnostic growth and EOC scores, because hopefully maybe that's wishful thinking, but hopefully by the end of the semester, you're in post-planning, you have your EOC scores there. You can reflect on this adaptive change and the progress that's been made. And then I think you look at it, you look at the strengths, weaknesses, what went right, what went wrong, and you create an action plan at that point for the 2022-23 school year. And you see, this is how we're going to implement it. And you may not have everything completely nailed down until pre-planning, but you have a good idea of what you're doing, where you're going with the plan, and try to make it even more successful the following year.